It happens in seconds, faster than most people ever imagine, because one moment you're making a decision that feels temporary, something you think you can control, and the next moment your entire life begins to shift in a direction you never planned. Because in the United States, the second a robbery involves a weapon, the law no longer sees it as just taking something, it sees it as a serious threat to human life. And that single detail is enough to transform everything about the situation, from how police respond to how the courts punish it, and how your future unfolds from that point forward. Armed robbery is not treated lightly. It is classified as a violent felony, and once that label is applied, the consequences move quickly and aggressively, often faster than the person involved can fully understand what is happening. At its most basic level, armed robbery involves taking property from another person through force, intimidation, or threat, while carrying or using a deadly weapon. And what makes this charge so powerful legally is that the weapon does not have to be used. It doesn't even have to be real in some cases, because if the victim believes it is real and feels threatened, the law treats that fear as enough to justify the charge, which means even implying that you have a weapon or displaying something that looks like one can instantly escalate the situation into a major felony. This focus on fear and perceived danger is what separates armed robbery from other forms of theft, because the law prioritizes the safety of people over the value of property, and once that safety is put at risk, the response becomes far more serious. The speed at which things change becomes clear the moment law enforcement gets involved. Because armed robbery is treated as a high-risk crime, officers are trained to respond quickly and with caution, often assuming that a weapon means there is a real possibility of violence, and that leads to forceful interventions, immediate arrests, and detailed investigations that begin almost instantly. Police may rely on surveillance footage, witness statements, and digital evidence to identify suspects, and once they have enough information, they move fast, because public safety is considered a priority in these situations. What might have felt like a short moment of action can suddenly turn into being surrounded by law enforcement, placed in handcuffs, and taken into custody, and from that point on, the situation is no longer in your control. After the arrest, the process continues quickly, with booking procedures where your information is recorded, fingerprints are taken, and formal charges are filed, and in cases involving a weapon, those charges are almost always felonies, often categorized as armed robbery or aggravated robbery depending on the state and the circumstances. Shortly after, you are brought before a judge for arraignment, where the charges are officially presented, and this is often when the reality of the situation becomes impossible to ignore, because bail is usually set very high or denied altogether, especially if a firearm was involved, and the possibility of facing years in prison becomes very real. In many cases, individuals remain in custody while their case moves forward, adding pressure and urgency to an already serious situation. The legal process that follows can move quickly in some ways and slowly in others, involving pretrial hearings, negotiations, and possibly a full trial. And throughout this time, the stakes remain extremely high because the potential consequences are severe. Prosecutors build their case using all available evidence, including video recordings, witness testimony, and any statements made during or after the arrest, while the defense may attempt to challenge the evidence or argue that the legal definition of armed robbery has not been fully met. However, these cases are often difficult to defend, especially when there is clear evidence of a weapon or a strong perception of threat, because the law is designed to take these situations very seriously. One of the most important reasons why life can change so quickly in armed robbery cases is the way sentencing works, because many states impose mandatory minimum penalties for crimes involving weapons, particularly firearms, which means that if a person is convicted, the judge may have little or no discretion in reducing the sentence, regardless of personal circumstances or whether it is a first offense. Depending on the details of the case, a conviction can lead to 10, 15, or even 20 years or more in prison, and in federal cases, additional charges related to the use or possession of a firearm during a violent crime can add extra years that must be served consecutively, not at the same time, which means the total sentence can increase dramatically, turning a single incident into decades behind bars. Another factor that accelerates the seriousness of the situation is that you do not have to be the person holding the weapon to face these charges, because under many U.S. laws, anyone involved in the robbery can be charged equally, meaning that even if you were acting as a lookout, driving a vehicle, or assisting in any way, you could still face the same armed robbery charge and the same potential penalties as the person carrying the weapon. This concept of shared responsibility catches many people off guard because they assume their role was minor, but the law focuses on participation and intent, not just direct action, and once you are connected to the crime, the consequences apply fully. If a conviction occurs, the impact goes far beyond prison time, because a felony conviction for armed robbery becomes a permanent part of your record, affecting your ability to find employment, secure housing, and build a stable future. And in many cases, it also results in the loss of certain civil rights, such as the ability to legally possess firearms. For non-citizens, the consequences can be even more severe, potentially leading to deportation or denial of immigration benefits, making the impact not just legal, but deeply personal and long-lasting. Even after serving a sentence, the challenges of rebuilding life can be significant, because the stigma of a violent felony can follow a person for years, limiting opportunities and creating obstacles that are difficult to overcome. What makes armed robbery so different from other crimes is not just the severity of the punishment, but how quickly everything changes once a weapon is involved, because the law is designed to respond immediately and aggressively to any situation that threatens public safety, and that means the shift from a single moment to a life-changing consequence can happen almost instantly. There is very little room for error, very little time to reverse the situation, and very few second chances once the process begins, and that is why understanding the seriousness of this charge is so important, because what feels like a small decision in the moment can quickly become a defining event that shapes the rest of your life. In the end, armed robbery charges in the United States represent one of the clearest examples of how fast life can change when a weapon is involved, because the combination of fear, risk, and potential harm creates a situation that the legal system is designed to punish as harshly as possible, and once that line is crossed, the consequences are immediate, severe, and long-lasting. A single decision can lead to years in prison, a permanent criminal record, and a future filled with challenges, and that is why the impact is not just fast, it is lasting, shaping everything that comes after in ways that are incredibly difficult to undo.